Hello again, I am Blunty. Now, just precisely how shit, how inept, how catastrophically stupid do you think the PlayStation engineers are? Alright, it's a bit of hyperbole there because obviously the engineers are pretty clever because, consoles these days are very complicated machines and, there's a lot of things you have to think about to make it work properly. I certainly couldn't do it. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I couldn't do it. But you do have to question their intelligence, or at least the intelligence of the people who are giving them their orders about what's important in, say, a controller, for example. Because as we approach the launch next month of the PlayStation Dualsense Edge controller, which is PlayStation's version of the Elite controller, basically, that Xbox has been doing for many years now, sort of an enhanced version of their standard controller. Extra features, extra bells and whistles for the truly dedicated gamer who wants to squeeze the most out of their gaming experience. They are, of course, charging a premium for it. In this case, it is, let me double check here. Yep, that's the price. I wasn't dreaming that. 339 Australian dollars. I think it's about $199 US, and the conversion we'll put on the screen there. Does that work out? I haven't done the math on that one yet. But $339 is, as a matter of fact, 1/2 of the cost of an entire PlayStation 5. So not exactly good value. So you'd think they'd engineer it to be extraordinarily good, like the absolute most premium parts you could possibly squeeze into a controller. Well, no, they haven't. They haven't even bothered putting in, say, Hall effect thumbsticks, for example, to avoid the notoriously shitty drift issue with the existing PlayStation controllers. Oh, but they do let you swap the thumbsticks out, so when you do eventually hit a drift issue with the crappy potentiometer thumbsticks, which are woefully out of date and have been for decades, and for some reason all the major companies are still using instead of switching over to Hall effect sensors, like for example in, where did I put it, this, which is the 8-bit Do Ultimate controller, which I reviewed recently. Didn't like this controller overall, but I did like the idea of the Hall effect thumb sensors in there. If you want to know more about those, I speak about them in the actual review. I'll link it in the down below. And for those of you who mentioned in my review of this, after I mentioned I didn't like it overall, the alternate third-party controller that a lot of you have suggested I check out and review, I have now ordered one of those, so keep your ears to the ground. It won't be arriving till New Year because we're in late December now and Christmas shipping, etc, 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 but it is coming. But additional upgrades that PlayStation have decided to make to this, the standard PlayStation 5 DualSense controller, things they thought were really, really important to gamers, include such groundbreaking changes as a little proprietary locking mechanism for the USB cable. Because that was a huge problem, apparently, the USB cable just flying out for no reason when people yank on their controllers. Now there's a lock there, so when people trip over the cable that's trailing across the floor, it's going to rip the console off the shelf or rip the controller out of your hand or off the couch or side table and send it scattering across the floor. I actually would prefer a cable that detaches rather more easily. Apple figured this out quite some time ago, which is why they do the little magnetic cable thingies. On the back of the controller, it has a couple little, well, not paddles, but little paddly type things, extra buttons on those. And I've had those on many different third-party controllers, including sort of my, where did I put that one? Here we go. One of my personal favorites that I use frequently on the PC. This is the Power A Fusion Pro. I always forget the name of this thing for some reason. It's Fusion Pro, right? Pretty sure it is. But it has an optional back panel thing. But as you can see, I've just got the blanking plate in there because I don't use the paddles myself. I just never use them. But some people do like those, and they're going to be included on the new PlayStation controller. Bit of a shrug for me on that one. Nothing groundbreaking or extraordinary there. The other feature is they're going to have a little switch on the back so you can change the activation length of the trigger there, which is a feature I approve of. I like that. I want that on more controllers. I recently looked at a mod for the standard Xbox controller, where did I put that one? Standard Xbox controller that sort of fakes that shorting activation difference. The mod was pretty decent, not perfect. Again, I'll link that in the down below if you're curious about that. But I like that. And I spoke again, where is it? About the analog triggers on this, which is a switch controller, but they included analog sticks on it because you can also use it with PC. But the Switch, of course, doesn't use analog triggers. It uses digital triggers, which means certain games that are designed to take advantage of the extraordinarily fast activation distance of digital triggers don't work that well with that controller. Well, this, having a switchable thing fixes that issue. So I approve of that. That's good. Default, built-in, switchable, tested, not a mod, just it's there. Good. And then you've got savable control profiles and customizable assignable buttons, which is a bit of a shit thing to sell you in a premium controller because you can do that in software. Steam does it and has done it for quite some time now. Any controller at all that is compatible with Steam, so all the major controllers and a bunch of third-party ones, even Joy-Cons these days, you can just go into Steam and change the controls to do whatever you like, even full-on macros and stuff. You can, Steam is really, really incredibly flexible with how you set up your personal controller, and it does it all in software without having to have special hardware to do it. But, PlayStation have decided to sell you that feature in a premium price $340 controller instead of just including it in the software so you can do it with your standard controller. No. And then they've got changeable stick caps, which is... That is the entire feature set, by the way, I've listed. There's not... And there's one more thing. That's it. That's their premium experience. Bit limited for that kind of price, I feel like. But beyond that, I was still interested in keeping an eye on this thing, waiting for, more information to come out, waiting for reviews to come out, because there was one thing that I was very interested in, and that is battery life. Because the battery life on the standard PlayStation 5 controller is shit. It is the worst in the industry. And I'm not just talking about the current generation. I'm talking about many generations of wireless controllers. It is the absolute worst. On paper, they say about, 12 hours, maybe 15 hours if you turn off a bunch of features. In the real life, I don't get that. And it's not a matter of my controller being just, a bit weaker or something, or I've set it up wrong. I've set it up right. I've turned down the strength of the force feedback. I've turned down the lighting on it and everything. I've done every setting I could possibly do to maximize battery life. And I will get 7 hours, 8 hours if I'm lucky. Nowhere close to their on-paper mark. I don't know what that's about, but it's the reason I got two controllers, so I can just switch out controllers when one goes dead, because the way I game, very frequently, particularly on weekends, or on my streaming, for example, I will play for sessions longer than this battery will last me. Significantly longer than this battery will last me. And I don't want to plug into a cable so I can keep playing because, well, frankly, I moved away from wired controllers quite some time ago. As you might be able to tell, I'm aging here. I am a, greybeard Gen Xer. I've been playing video games for as long as video games have been, a commercial product pretty much. The Atari 2600 released the year before I was born, came to Australia when I was like 3 or 4 or something. I've been gaming for 4 decades. Without a break. All of my life, literally my earliest memory is playing a video game. And all of my 4 decades of life I've been as a gamer. So I've experienced every console generation there is to experience so far. And when we moved away from wired controllers as a standard, I was very, very happy. And when Nintendo introduced this, which is the Wavebird, a GameCube controller. It didn't come as standard with the GameCube, but it was the first truly superb wireless controller. And one of the first party wireless controllers that is truly, truly superb as well. This thing still works perfectly all these years later. I still use it from time to time when I'm emulating games and whatnot, because it is a fantastically well put together controller and solid as a rock. And the wireless was perfect. And its battery life was 100 hours. 100 hours off a couple of AA batteries, which aren't in there at the moment because they're in the charger back there, because I use rechargeables because that's an environmentally friendly thing to do. More environmentally friendly than disposable batteries anyway. And there comes my sticking point with the new PlayStation controller. The reason I was excited about it is because I thought, well, if they're going to give us the premium experience in their eyes, clearly, they're going to fix the biggest problem that this controller has. The absolute most complained about issue of this controller is the battery life. I dare you to prove me wrong. Go online. Go find places where they're talking about issues with this controller. There are two things: the stick drift and the battery life. The stick drift is awful. The battery life is consistently awful. Some people get stick drift. Everybody has terrible battery. So I was hoping they would fix that. But it turns out they didn't even care enough to fix the stick drift, because the sticks included with the premium controller are not the Hall effect sensors, as we've been talking about, the standard old controllers. And they're just going to sell you replacements like it was a disposable component. They're not taking responsibility for it breaking down. They're going, well, when it breaks down, just replace that bit. Thanks, Sony. But the battery life is not improved. In fact, it is worse, because what they've done is put a whole bunch more features in the controller, requiring more processing on the controller for, you know, the profiles and whatnot, I suppose. But then kept the exact same battery component that they used in this, which is already the weakest on the market. So when you put an already weak battery in a more powerful product, the battery lasts less. Let me read you Sony's official statement on this, by the way, because it has some of that lovely, lovely PR spin wording. The DualSense Edge wireless controller operating time is moderately shorter than the original DualSense wireless controller, because we've included many more features within the same form factor and ergonomic design as the original DualSense controller. That's some PR weasel words right there, because number one, moderately shorter. How much? How much shorter? How much is moderately to you? 10%? 20%? This seems fairly moderate. That's a significant amount of battery time, though. Also, they're going, oh, they're implying they couldn't put a bigger battery in because it's in the same form factor. More features, same form factor. Couldn't put a bigger battery in. Yeah, physical size of battery is not a dictator of capacity. Go look at rechargeable AA batteries as a handy example. You can get very low capacity ones, say 1500 milliamp hour, which is, well, say what this has, 1560, something like that. Or you can get a rechargeable AA battery that's 2600 milliamp hour in exactly the same size. The same thing is true of the battery packs they use in these. I think you could kind of see it through the back of my transparent back on the Switch controller there, that little box, right? You've seen it in phones, back when you could replace batteries in phones. Exactly the same battery form factor, significantly higher capacities. You see it in camera batteries. Like, I've got this is my third party. No, this is my first party one. You can third party batteries for my camera here. Exactly the same form factor, significantly increased capacity. And I have one somewhere back there in the box, I suppose. So they're kind of lying that they couldn't increase battery capacity because they kept the same form factor. That's a bit of a weasel there. So all of that is just a bunch of weasel words to say, yeah, we know it's shit and it's actually worse than the old controller used to be, but what are you going to do? So given that I get about 7 or 8 hours out of a standard controller, what can I expect from the Elite? Sorry, not Elite, Edge. Same letter. 5 hours? 6 hours. What does moderately less battery life look like for the Edge? Either way, it's atrocious and won't get me through even a moderate play session on a Friday evening, never mind my longer sessions on the weekends. Just to drive this point home, let's look at all the controllers I actually use. Like, I'm not just figuratively picking off the internet, oh, what's the best battery life controller out there, just so I can make Sony look even more foolish. These are the controllers I actually use regularly. Like, I could reach them from where I was sitting because I use them regularly, that kind of regular. Switch Pro controller. I like this controller quite a lot. This has 40 hours of battery life. I've never measured that, but it is such an extensive battery life, I've never had to worry about it. This controller has never, ever gone flat on me in the middle of a gaming session. Never once. Never even come close to it. And I've had some extended play sessions with this thing. 40 hours is more than enough. The PowerA Fusion Pro, which is a Switch controller, but I mostly use this on PC, especially when I'm playing things like Monster Hunter Rise, which is a Switch port on PC because it has the digital triggers. I reviewed this controller. I really like this controller. I have been using it since my review very, very regularly. It has 20 hours of battery life. Half of the standard Nintendo Pro controller, and it doesn't even have all the features that the Pro controller has. It doesn't have NFC, for example. But 20 hours is still plenty. This thing has never, ever gone flat on me in the middle of a play session. The current model Xbox controller. I have two because there's one that's always synced to the Xbox. There's one that I use on my PC. It saves me fiddling around resyncing them because, well, when I'm playing PC games, more often than not, like most people, I'm using the Xbox controller there. So they both have a rechargeable battery component snapped into them, so I could use it in a dock. So when I'm done, I can just pop it in the dock instead of fiddling with cables and stuff and having it all ugly on my desk, or my shelves in this case. But I get about 30 hours from these, which, as you might imagine by now, I am going to call more than adequate. They have never, ever, ever gone flat on me in the middle of a gaming session. Even the Joy-Con, which I very rarely actually use because I vastly prefer the Pro Controller, because I'm a sane person, but even these, when I have had the desire to use them, like in Breath of the Wild, where I do like to use separated controllers so I can do the motion controlling bow assist aiming thing, which is one of the very few occasions I do use motion assist aiming, but it works really well in Breath of the Wild. These have a 20-hour battery life, more than adequate. Have never, ever, ever gone flat on me in the middle of a gaming session. The 8-bit Do Ultimate, which, again, I've reviewed recently, but don't really use regularly. I'm still kind of testing it on and off to see if I can get used to the issues that I had with it in my original review. Again, you can watch that if you want to know what they are. But I'm still, using it, seeing if long-term use it gets better or I change my mind about it. But it has a 30-hour battery life. Guess what I'm going to say about that? And the actual competitor to the DualSense Edge, the Xbox Elite, I don't have one of those. I've never been able to justify the cost of one of those because, quite frankly, I'm pretty damn happy with how these things work. Is my camera friggin'? Sorry, my camera's... It's been doing a thing recently. I can't figure out what's going on with that. I'm going to try and fix it. So we better wrap this video up before that gets really, really annoying. So the Xbox Wireless Elite controller, the version 2, the current model, the actual competitor to the Edge, it has a 40-hour battery life, 40, the same as Nintendo's class-leading Pro Controller here, with a bigger feature set, significantly bigger feature set. So for Sony to come out and stomp out their new premium priced 50% of the cost of an entire PlayStation 5 controller and have worse battery life than the already worst battery life controller on the market, it's a bit shit. Which is why I questioned at the beginning, how dumb are Sony engineers, or indeed the people giving them their orders? I was not happy but willing to think about justifying the cost of the Elite controller if it fixed the biggest issues that I have with it. The primarily being that shit battery life, but they haven't done that. So from here on in, I consider anybody who does spend that kind of money on a PlayStation Edge controller a moron. That is an absurd price for the level of value they're delivering to you. It's a worse product with a few extra bells and whistles. Several of those bells and whistles should be handled in software, so everybody could have them. Sony are shit. Thank you for watching. Sorry about the glitchy camera. Seriously, I've got to figure out what's going on with that. Thanks to the patrons scrolling up above there, and I will catch you next time.